Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Data Unchained. I'm your host, Molly Presley. Before we introduce today's guest, let me tell you just a little bit about this podcast. The idea of Data Unchained was created by the idea that really the data access patterns, data creation patterns that are occurring in the world today are so much different than they were even 5 years ago, much less 10, 20, 30 years ago. Back from the mainframe days where data was very centralized around a big machine in a big data center. Then we had the advent of cloud computing, distributed computing, cloud storage. People moved remotely during COVID and the workforce has become increasingly decentralized. And we have IoT and edge computing where data is created all the way out to the edge. So data has become distributed. This is something we are all dealing with the complexities of, but also it opens up an enormous amount of opportunities in the world. This podcast focuses on both the challenges as well as the opportunities in taking advantage of this distributed data and putting it to work to grow new products, make human health better, and really just overall add to the technology advancements in whatever type of organization you're working in. So without further ado, let me introduce Shiraz Ritwik. Shiraz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here, Molly.
Shiraz is the head of growth at Laton Analytics. He is responsible for banking, finance, financial services, insurance, CPG, hospitality. So a wide range of what we all know, very data intensive types of workloads. So before we jump into talking about what you do for work, Shiraz, tell us a little bit about your background, what brought you to talking on Data Unchained as an expert today.
Certainly. And once again, thanks, Molly. Really appreciate the opportunity to be on Data Unchained. Amazing podcast. I've really enjoyed some of the past episodes. My background, I would say, is when I was hearing you talk about mainframes and then going into cloud computing, I was thinking back to my early days as an IT sourcing analyst with one of the premier consulting firms back then. Really what we were working on was helping understand the impact of remote infrastructure management outsourcing back in the 2005 to 2010 timeframe. So my professional
the age of
life,
managed services, right? Or the rise of managed services at the time.
absolutely, and service-oriented architecture, and the whole buzz was around asset-light infrastructure models, where the likes of the traditional outsourcers were being upstaged by some of these newer upstarts that were coming in with a very capital light model to infrastructure outsourcing and bringing in
Book
associated cost
companies were trying to become service providers and became Amazon over time.
Exactly, and now those same smaller outsourcers are now some of the giants hailing from all over the globe, really, and so much so that I would say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And where it earlier started off from the likes of Infosys, TCS, and others, following the path that IBM, Accenture, and Capgemini had laid out, in the next 10 years or 15 years, what we really saw was IBM, Accenture, and Capgemini and the others started morphing into something that looks like some of these later outsourcers, in that they increased their outsourcing strategy. They really started leveraging talent from a global talent pool and uncovered new models for infrastructure as well as applications. So that's kind of where I started off life. It's been an exciting journey since then. I moved more heavily into sourcing strategy around the 2010 timeframe, started looking at various categories of indirect spend. As we know, IT is a significant portion of that. But that was also around the time when big data was coming up on the horizon. And artificial intelligence and machine learning was starting to be applied to problems like spend analytics and sourcing. And that is where I saw my first introduction to the world of analytics, where we started breaking down and automatically categorizing this like monolithic spend into categories of indirect spend, which could then be looked at in terms of levers using which you could save money for the client organization. So spent a little bit of time there, helped source various categories of spend, help to realize multi-million dollar savings for our clients. And from that point, really, the interesting thing was as analytics kind of evolved, as machine learning techniques became more mainstream, I also moved into the areas of CPG and retail in terms of applying some of these techniques to loyalty programs at retailers and helping retailers and manufacturers kind of collaborate on rolling out the best offers in a personalized way to members of these loyalty programs. So, really looked at like loyalty programs with 80 to 90 million customers and segmenting them into various kinds of usage, various kinds of preferences, and bringing that all together in terms of delivering personalized offers. So that was kind of the second phase of life. And the third phase really moved into applying analytics and machine learning techniques more broadly into the financial services areas, where I really looked at spaces like payments and brokerages, where it became very interesting. As you alluded to, the shift of data and the velocity of data and others being very different in the last 5 years, I think we're seeing a lot of impact of that, especially in the financial services space. Payments is a key representative of that. As digital transactions have increased in volume, so have they in velocity. So it's becoming increasingly important for payments providers to look at how to be able to identify anomalies, how to respond from a regulatory perspective around what payments are good versus bad, to kind of simplify it a little bit. So that's been life overall. Really welcomed the opportunity to start working with Laton View about 3.5 years ago. Um, Realized the opportunity to lead growth for multiple verticals, and as a part of that, really solution what some of our clients were looking for in terms of bringing data, AI, and analytics together to deliver specific outcomes in this space. So it's been a roller coaster ride, very interesting time looking at amazing problems and taking a shot at developing solutions for clients across the board.
It's a great history, and I think some of us who see all the buzz about AI right now can forget how long analytics has been around and kind of evolving. People were using AI 10 years ago, like you said. We had a podcast guest recently that, his title has been AI expert for at least 10 years. So it's not new, but there's a lot of new potential, a lot of new interest, a lot of new capabilities. And I think it's really interesting to hear from folks like you who've been in the space as it's kind of evolved from business intelligence and, kind of continuing to go on into what AI has evolved into today. Just out of curiosity, for the markets you serve, the types of verticals and use cases, is this kind of just a continuum of better and better analytics, or is there something new that has happened that all of a sudden with AI and maybe GPU processors, there's something new happening in your space?
Uh, I think it's a combination of both. There is definitely an evolutionary part of this constant track to getting better at delivering insights using analytics. But the step change that has really happened is generative AI, or I should say the step change that could happen. Because, like everyone around us, we are also experimenting with generative AI, and we're at the point where we are beginning to solve specific problems using our generative AI point solutions. Um, it does hold a lot of promise in terms of specific solves like summarization, like being more creative. But at the same time, we're still at a nascent stage where we'll see all kinds of solutions coming up, some of them getting cut down and morphing into other approaches as well. Uh, it's interesting that you bring up GPUs, because there is definitely a role for GPU providers and hyperscalers to collaborate and make this experimentation process much more natural, much more fluid, because that is how we'll get to some solutions that are more robust and industry standard.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, we're definitely seeing that if you can search more easily, that is an immediate productivity unlock. If you can bypass the somewhat tedious and long winded process of creating a dashboard for every query, then that is again another near term low hanging fruit. And we are definitely focused on chasing some of those while continuing to focus on more strategic unlocks as well.
That makes sense. So before we go deeper, would you tell us just a little bit more about Latent View Analytics? What does the company do? Who are your clients? Just a little bit more about that.
We're a young 17-year-old company, so really a teenager, and we have been focused during our entire life on solving uh, problems with AI and analytics for Fortune 500 companies. Uh, Coming from some other companies in this space, it's always interesting to see how we end up focusing on our current clients very strongly. So our current clients really love working with us, and about 80 to 90% of our business is with folks who've worked with us. That also kind of brings it makes my role more important in the sense that taking the word out to people who've never worked with us before. um, I think a lot of our DNA is focused around our early work with tech pioneers like the Googles and Adobes and Microsofts of this world, many of whom are our significant clients for over 10 to 12 years now. And that enables us to have learned from their digital evolution, understanding the customer journey, the value of omnichannel, and being able to drive customers towards more fruitful outcomes for them as well as for the business. So, Latent View overall is one of the only publicly held analytics companies in the world. We went public at the end of 2021 in the Indian capital markets, and we are, in a sense, I would say, almost a bellwether of what the market thinks about the potential of analytics. So we definitely hold that position and view that position with great responsibility and humility. Appreciate the opportunity to kind of drive that change. And at the same time, we continue to forge ahead in terms of creating innovative solutions in CPG, in tech, in a variety of other verticals, including.
So much experience there to tap into. I think that's great. So if a customer, as we're going through this, is interested in working with you all and they say, I'm trying to figure out my strategy or my way to use some of these tools to become more efficient. How do they reach out to you all? Is there a process to kind of figuring out the engagement? What kind of problem do people usually reach out to you with? Maybe is a better way to ask the question.
Certainly. I think a majority of the work that we do today is in the area of marketing analytics. Um, Having said that, we definitely work on, for instance, if I take CPG, a lot of our work focuses around three areas: digital commerce, supply chain, and developing a connected view for supply chain, and then product innovation, which is, I would say, an area where we're highly differentiated and, dare I say it, sought after as well. Um, Outside of CPG, I think our ability to work with omnichannel digital customer journeys, marketing mix modeling, and other similar problems puts us in a somewhat unique bucket of services that clients can engage on with us. So typically, we engage a lot with chief digital officers, chief data and analytics officers, and their organizations. We also work very closely with CMOs and their marketing organizations in order to deliver the outcomes that are most important. So for CMOs, we would look at driving marketing ROI. For chief digital officers and chief data officers, we would look at driving their data and analytics strategy, the road mapping, and then really being able to help them realize very tangible benefits, such as sometimes it's as simple as annual run rate cost savings year over year for their entire organization. So, as we do that, we always lead with our ability to develop an outside in perspective of the problems that our clients are facing, and kind of best served by maybe taking an example. So, for instance, at one of the large payment network clients, this is a client where they are probably one of the top three payment networks in the world. And we started working with their central marketing team in order to help them run their campaigns better, understand what kind of ROI they were getting, and also look at more dynamic spend allocation changes during the campaign. So traditionally, a lot of this was challenging because typically once you allocate spend to a campaign and press go on the campaign button, you're really you're really locked in terms of how that campaign runs. Your target audiences, your copy, your A/B testing, your messages, your offers, they're all locked in and they keep proceeding. We help them achieve a couple of things here. One is during the campaign itself, we help them develop a much more dynamic view of how the campaign was performing. And we did that by being able to tap into the data sets that were being generated from a campaign response perspective and very quickly piping that into BI or basically dashboards, which were giving them a view of how of the campaign performance. This enabled them to look at reallocating spends very quickly and firstly looking at what if scenarios. So if I do reallocate this spend, am I able to start influencing the right segments of customers through the right channels? And secondly, what we were able to do was after the campaign, really looking at what was the result really of the entire campaign. Quite often, the challenge in this part of the workflow has been that as you look at campaign responses from customers across multiple channels, the channel data can be very murky. It can be there's a lot of duplication. Let's take an example. So suppose, Molly, you come to latonview.com today and you say, let me download a white paper. You might go in and enter your name and your email address. That'll be fine. When you enter your company name, you might use maybe an acronym, which is commonly used, whereas someone else might use the full company name. And there might be a third version as well. Now, if we're looking across, let's say, 2000 downloads of this kind of a white paper, it'll be very challenging to programmatically just lay out that, these were the three channels that contributed. Unless, of course, you're able to run natural language processing and text analytics and classification to be able to understand and club together all the different names that represent your company, and then latonview.com gets a very clear view of the full contribution from that company to the white paper. So again, this is more of the analogy for the kind of solution that we implemented for this payment network. And when we were able to do that, it helped them to understand the true impact of different channels to their overall marketing campaigns. And today, this solution is live across the central marketing team and all campaigns that they run.
I think that's interesting. And, as I get the opportunity to talk to interesting data people in this podcast, we've talked to quite a few data scientists who have spoken about just this data cleaning process where when they started their career, it was hard, but it's gotten almost impossible now because of what you're saying, the volume, the velocity, that the human being's ability to do a lot of the work that you're saying right now is getting very stretched. No matter how many data scientists you have, and data engineers and folks in that space. So I think that's cool to hear how you're using some of the natural language to simplify some of the problems that maybe have existed in the business intelligence world for a while now, getting clean data, of your marketing campaigns or your CRM. That's really cool. When you're being engaged by a client, maybe it's some C-suite person who reaches out to you and thinks it's a good idea to engage with you, do they tend to know? Are they looking at, we want to launch an AI initiative? Are they looking to streamline their business intelligence initiatives? Do they even know specifically which tools or technologies they want to use? Or are they asking you to kind of scope their data strategies in general and recommend the right tools and technology?
That's actually a great question, Molly, because if I look at the spectrum of CXO conversations going on at any point in time, it really stretches from one end to the other because there are clients at every level of maturity. For some of the clients where they are still, let's say, trying to understand and grapple with the data, what we hear a lot is, you know, if we've gone in and said, why don't we look at data science and way to drive impact with data science? Sometimes the answer we get back is, you know what, we need to fix our data first. So come back in about 6 to 12 months. And And at that point, and that is part of the process of understanding where the client is at. So it's okay for us to also be able to go back and say, you know what, let's try and understand the data challenges that you have. This is a more fundamental and foundational problem. Let's try and figure out what your tech stack is, which cloud hyperscaler are you on, and maybe we can help you connect your data sources together and build out the kind of data warehouses and data lakes that you need, and then figure out what kind of consumption that you need to drive off of that. In other cases, especially in some of the more tech savvy clients, a lot of the story is around the outcomes. And in some cases, there are really large tech clients who have their own suite of solutions. So there they are expecting us to solve the business problem. They expect us to know the tech stack. And what they are talking to us about is, can you help me identify how to drive up my conversion from free trial to paid? And this is, let's say, in the case of an OTT customer. And so there, the challenge is very much around the data science, around building out the models, deploying them, and running making the changes to the product, and then driving from there to the outcome. So that's kind of the two ends of the spectrum. In many cases, we start at one end and go through to the entire spectrum. So if I take the example of, let's say, a turnkey asset management player with whom we've been working for the last 3 to 4 years. Uh, a lot of the context there was their customers were financial advisors. And these financial advisors were managing their clients' portfolios. And our client essentially helped these financial advisors manage that money better. And their revenue was predicated off of the assets under management on the platform. However, they did not have a very mature system to be able to cut across this entire set of players and share the kinds of data that was required. So we helped them build out the data infrastructure in the form of an enterprise data hub, which really connected this entire ecosystem. We helped them build out subscriptions to over 2,000 different ecosystem partners as well as clients, the financial advisors themselves. And we help develop ingestion patterns for different kinds of market data providers like a Refinitiv and other like Bloomberg and others who would then pipe the data into this turnkey asset management platform. That enabled them to really start focusing on, okay, how many of our financial how many of our financial advisors are attriting from the platform? Are they at risk? How should we treat them in order to retain them? For our financial advisors, can we offer them analytics around what their clients are doing and how their clients' investments are performing? Can we offer them insights and recommendations? So that really moved things up the value chain, not only for us, but for our clients, in terms of being able to work on more sophisticated data science problems and give them the outcomes that were needed to bring their revenue growth back on track. So, as a brief context, as soon as the pandemic hit, it hit wealth management strongly. But for our client, the impact was doubly so. So, in working with them and in helping them upgrade their overall data infrastructure, we were able to actually bring them back on track and, in fact, supersede the industry growth path in terms of growth percentage. So it's experiences like that that tell us that we have to be more sensitive to where the client is at and help them figure out a solution that solves their problem today while ensuring that they have a roadmap and a path to proceeding further.
I was just out on the East Coast talking to some banks and similar types of clients that you were talking about just now on the wealth management side last week. And we were talking, it was a Gen AI summit for CIOs that I was at. And, having these conversations is very interesting. That financial services is, I think, historically one of the most conservative industries out there. They're careful, risk adverse for good reason. They're managing our money, right? And yet they need to embrace new technologies to be competitive. How do you help them vet new technologies? So it sounds like your organization has a lot of experience and probably spans different skill sets and whatnot. But how do you, as an organization, go find out about new technologies, vet which ones are the right ones, which ones are going to make it, which ones aren't? I bet that would be a huge value to organizations that you're working with.
Certainly, and again, that's a great question, Molly, because it comes back to having an entrepreneurial mindset. Um, we were so some of our founders have always been focused on making sure that we stay abreast not only of the changes in the industry but also look to lead the industry in terms of those changes. So in things like generative AI, or let's say Power Apps for Microsoft, we quickly spend no time in quickly spinning up centers of excellence and innovation to continue to innovate around what was coming up. So as the world of generative AI turned to large language models and then small language models, we quickly struck up partnerships with both NVIDIA and Microsoft. So today, when a client comes to us and says, "Can we look at summarization and creatives copy?" we have at least three different solutions already built out. Secondly, we are sensitive to things like some clients wouldn't want to be on open source large language models, like let's say a GitHub OpenAI. In that case, we are very happy to work with them on the NVIDIA related platforms, because that enables you to develop your own um, internal large language model. And that allows us also to learn very quickly around, what are the challenges with each approach. For open source, you're spending tons and tons of time being able to fine tune and engineer prompts around those large language models. Whereas for on-prem, again, the challenge is different because you have a unique data set specifically for that company, but then each problem needs to be solved as if it's the first time. So those are because we built out COEs, we have teams of experts who can actually work on those specific problems and really fine tune a solution to what the customer needs exactly. I could take another example of, let's say, Power BI, where quite often the kind of solution may not be, let's say, path breaking. It might not be very exciting to hear about, but when you start applying it, you realize that you are unlocking huge savings. So, for instance, we recently looked at a financial services client where the whole emphasis today for them is to deliver cost savings across the board, given the current industry scenario. So I was talking to their to the delivery team from our side, and they said that we're looking at building out and maintaining a bunch of dashboards, and there's so much that needs to get refreshed every week, every month. So we uh, we kind of discussed how to look at the entire set of dashboards and what kind of cost they were incurring in terms of scan frequency of each of these dashboards. We found there was 7,000 dashboards with each of those dashboards had 10 to 15 tiles in them, and each tile was being refreshed sometimes on an hourly basis, sometimes on a daily basis, and
Expensive,
each
right?
refresh is a job. Yes.
Yeah.
And the kind of savings we could help them realize just by shutting down some of these dashboards was tremendous. So obviously there needs to be a consulting effort around that to drive that change and therefore realize those savings. But it starts from looking at problems in a very pragmatic way and understanding where those savings can be unlocked.
And that's difficult to do when you're in the middle of it. It's that forest for the trees analogy. You're running your day, you're busy, you're just trying to keep the information flowing, and stopping and taking a look at how to do it more efficiently is often very difficult. You're just trying to keep it running, right? And having an outside perspective who can just focus on that can add so much value. Let's talk about CPG just a little bit. So you by kind of the nature of what you're doing are dealing with some really high volume markets, whether it's high volume transactions, high volume goods, lots of humans involved. Is there an analog to the work of what you're doing in financial services with CPG, or is it just a completely different set of problems?
I would say the context of data having sped up and innovation becoming a key part of it is I think common to both areas. If you look at supply chain today, it's a huge problem. It continues to be a huge problem, even though people said, pandemic is 4 years down. It's gone.
Well, now
But
we can't get along globally, and there's always something, right? New
yeah,
constraints
I
on
don't.
who will do business with whom and all of that.
Indeed. And if you look at the key channels of commerce today, I think I don't know if they've resolved the situation around the Panama Canal or was where I think the volume of water has actually gone down, and that
Hmm.
means that the number of ships that go through is about it's gone down from 36 ships to only about 12 ships. So that being one of the key trade routes, now you have to replan your entire supply chain network. You need to reconsider your choice of suppliers. That kind of fundamental challenge is definitely going to impact how we plan supply chain, and that is where I think as we look across the network, um, with with fulfillment having sped up, with demand having got more digitally originated, the again the same volume and velocity of data has increased. Now if you throw retail media networks into the mix, where you have so many more opportunities to advertise as manufacturers, you're actually looking at not being left behind in that race. So I was listening to another podcast recently by the CPG guys, in fact, and it turns out that the number of CPG companies using more than 10 media networks, retail media networks, has gone up from about I think about 10% to almost 36% in the last 2 years alone. So that that then has downstream effects in terms of how you're allocating your spend. So we do a lot of media mix modeling, and that means that a number of our clients are actually looking to pipe some of that retail media network data into media mix modeling and reevaluate their spend allocation. And from there, it continues downward into demand forecasting, into shopper insights, into connected view for supply chain, inventory management, and then downward. But if I jump way back into the complete upstream and say, how do I really innovate products? That is an oft ignored but huge opportunity for most CPG companies. And that's because recently a Harvard Business Review article said that about 85% of product launches, they just completely fail. And it's because it's so hard to read the mind of the consumer and understand what kind of solutions will actually work. Um, that is where there are some categories where consumers will be more open with what they like or don't like, whereas there are others where you won't hear too much. So let's
Hmm.
take an example, right? Skincare. Uh, People love talking about the kind of lotions that really feel soft and soothing on the skin versus others that perhaps are not um, as invigorating. Sometimes there are health benefits that are touted, and it's always very, very subjective for the consumer. Compound that with videos on Instagram or let's say influencer videos on other social media channels. How do you separate the real consumer from the influencer and understand what the true trend is?
Hmm.
Now, a lot of CPGs have got good at distilling some of this trend based information, but they have no idea how to tie that back into specific things that they need to do with their product. So we started this journey, say, about 6 to 7 years ago. And we realized very quickly that while social media is a big part of that solve, I think the other parts of it are to understand what can really drive the innovation of a product that can win in the market. And that is where, if we look at things like packaging, the benefits that a product can bring, the claims that you can make on on top of the product, and the core ingredient that you put into the product, those are the things that really define what a product brief is. And a key part of this entire innovation cycle is in being able to very quickly arrive at a product attribute mix that can win in the market. So that is where I think we've been able to bring together social media, blogs, expert reviews, internal data such as product volumes and shipments of existing products, and then third party data like a Mintel, a GNPD, Nielsen, IRI, Kantar, Circana, and then put all of that together to really understand what are the top five, top seven, top 10 options you have in terms of ingredient, packaging, benefits, and claims, and focus only on those. So when you do that, it really accelerates your entire product innovation cycle.
I took a course a long time ago when I was first in marketing. It was called Mastering Value Innovation. It was from a gentleman named Dick Lee, who it really focused on this, like, who are you actually selling to and what do they care about? Is it the doctor who decides? Is it the nurse? Or is it actually the procurement office? Like there's a lot of these things of who are you really selling to and which components matter to them. And it was, a pre me being even in the data world exercise, and even complex then because you're trying to figure out, actually, maybe I think the nurse is the one making the decision, but they're not, and so maybe designing for what the nurse needs isn't the right answer. But I bring this up because, that's a hard problem just on the human level. Now you're talking in a data world where this is all hidden within massive data sets that are siloed, probably created in different locations, applications, different owners in the business, that type of thing. So when you embark on something like this and you're saying, okay, let's get the correct data from the correct sources to make the kinds of decisions that matter or the analytics that matter, how do you do that? How do you help an organization merge their data sets or get insights from all these different platforms and types of things like that?
Certainly, there's we have a framework in mind which we're able to apply with increasing rigor. And the reason we have a framework and not a product is because we realize that the solution for every CPG customer is quite unique based on how mature they are. Like you mentioned, right? There are some data sources in-house, there are some data sources coming in which they've bought or subscribed to. And we really bring a lot of that together and develop a solution that is unique rather than being one more product that they need to integrate with and then figure out how that product links up with five other data sets. We take ownership of the problem. We're able to figure out from a CPG perspective, from a category perspective, what would make sense. Uh, in one of our recent clients, we are actually not doing the social media and trending part because they believe they have it covered. And so we are leveraging the data set that they have, which incidentally has never been married to R&D and the tasting and the consumer preferences.
Right, right.
So that linking that alone has so much of an unlock that after that, when you bring in a Circana or a Kantar, you're now able to see linkages across not only the preferences and consumer voice for your own products, but also what the market is saying, what the consumer is saying about your competitors' products, and thereby you're able to figure out, what is the ideal gap in which your new product would play, somewhere where there is a market need which is unaddressed and where no one really has where no brand really has dominance in terms of being able to claim that space.
Interesting. So fascinating. And I like what you said, that I think it helps, at least in my mind, and probably others as well, set that thought of it. This is a framework, and a framework that's been tested a lot against a lot of use cases, a lot of different types of customer environments, that type of thing to build the framework. As we tie up, I just like to check with you on, what guidance would you give our listeners who probably all have some flavor of the types of problems that we're talking about, maybe all of them? How would they embark on the decision of, is it time to contact someone like yourself to help them with their problems? Is there maybe some homework they should do on cleaning their data sets first? I think you'd probably say no. Let us look at the framework first. But how would you help them with making the decision on, is it time to reach out to an organization like yourselves?
And that's a great question, actually, because in many cases, companies choose to go after that problem and build that muscle themselves. What we would say is look at the time horizon within which you want to crack the code on many of these problems. In most cases, you've gone and purchased some point solutions, and now you're trying to realize value out of that investment. What you really need in that case is someone who is a thought leader and can help you understand how to derive the most value out of it and derive some of that value upfront right now while showing you a path and working with you and your teams to deliver that over the course of time. Um, I think the suggestion here would be for sure, build out your teams, but at the same time, look to augment the value of that your teams can bring to the table with people like Latent View, for instance.
What's the best way for a customer to interact with you all? Do they just go to your website, or what is the best way to contact you if they're interested to learn more?
Yes, please reach out to us on www.latentview.com or look us up on LinkedIn. We're present on all the social media channels, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, or Facebook, and on YouTube as well. But feel free to visit us on the website, give us a shout, and we'll be there.
Sounds great. Shiraz, thank you so much for joining, taking the time to share your experience in a pretty complex topic that I think is on top of mind of a lot of our listeners thinking each day. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Molly. Really appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation. Loved it today. Look forward to being here again.
Thanks for listening to Data Unchained, powered by Hammerspace. To learn more, visit hammerspace.com. If you have a guest you would like to hear on the show, email me at molly@hammerspace.com.